Yes.
And we have mayor James, he's the one that will handle so much. So, you know,
He's
that's built into it. He's
He bought me an
about
option.
200, 300,000 gallons.
Oh, cool.
That sounds really good.
Mayor, I'm ready when you are.
All right.
Yeah, one of the problems is
Okay, we will call, I will call the City Selection Committee meeting for January 30th, 2015 to order. And will Secretary call the roll?
Yes. Committee Member Huber,
Present.
Committee Member Proctor,
Present.
Committee Member Laura,
Here.
Committee Member Heitman,
Mike Tracy filling in here.
and Committee Member Tracy. Committee Member Hensley,
Here, sir.
please join us at the table, sir.
Okay.
He's just as a separate person for cities. Is that
Oh.
okay? I'm the mayor.
Oh, then,
He's
no, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
You're from Boston.
She's
Yeah.
a marathon
Santa Rosa.
My mistake. It's Committee Member Flynn,
I'm here on behalf of Mayor Flynn,
and that'd be
Carmen Ramirez.
Councilmember Ramirez, Committee Member Munoz Schnapp,
Here.
and Committee Member Tucker.
Present.
Okay, now we have a quorum.
All right, will you join me in the...
you didn't call me.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry. Kildee, Mayor Kildee?
No, Mayor Little.
Little. Sorry, sir.
And Parvin, did you get Parvin?
And Parvin, too, I saw you last.
That's
Let's do
right.
it all together, thank
This
you.
meeting was set in 2014.
On that note, will you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Hand over heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on, agenda review. Consider and approve by majority vote minor revisions to the agenda items.
I do have a few revisions, ma'am. There is a revision packet to item number 8 that was distributed to your committee, and there was a letter of consideration submitted by Councilmember Ramirez that has also been submitted to your committee regarding the LAFCO vacancy. With that, no other changes have been made.
Next item is item 5,
Can I
election.
get a motion to approve this as revised?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Quickly moving to item 5, election of chair and vice chair to the City Selection Committee for calendar years 2015-2016.
And again, if I may, ma'am, when I prepared this agenda, I was under the impression that at least the mayors like yourself serve for a 2-year term. And so some of you are serving for a 1-year term. If you want to elect a member, for those of you that are only serving for a 1-year term, that's fine. We'll just modify the term of office and state that it's for the calendar year of 2015. It's a pleasure of your committee.
Questions, comments?
Can we get
What's
a,
easiest for you?
can we get a nomination?
There's probably more mayors being one-year term than 2.
That's fine. So again, you can nominate a member, and whatever the term for that particular member is what the term of the office will be for this committee.
We meet so often, too.
Yes.
remember.
Janice, would you like to continue?
I'm open to anyone else that might like to do it as well. But I wouldn't mind doing it if that's how everyone feels.
I would Janice Parton. Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Would the committee consider a vice chair at this time? I don't know if you've had one before, if you've
We
just
haven't.
had a chair. It's a pleasure of the committee.
I mean, I'll jump in and.
So I'll nominate Sarah, and I'll second that.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is public comments. We do have some public.
I believe they're here for your items.
All right. Next, committee member comments? Any comments? Moving right through.
Can I say something? I don't know if you can tell me in that order, but I really appreciate the cities that have signed on to the oil train issue, and I know you believe, James, appreciate that. The city of Oxnard followed up, and I think the counties also, people don't know that. You'll find out later, and I just want to say appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. I wouldn't vote any other way on that item. Not sure how others might vote, but. All right, moving on to item 8, appoint a city member as a director and a city member as an alternate director to the Association of Water Agencies of Ventura County for a 2-year term, effective March 5th, 2015 through March 2nd, 2017.
Yeah, can I just introduce myself? I'm Kelly Pistone with the Association of Water Agencies, AWA. And sometimes there's confusion about this group. It's a countywide nonprofit organization. Their only focus is to disseminate information on the water and create a forum for people in our county, Ventura County, to come together and discuss water issues that impact our quality of life, cost, supply, that type of thing. So there's a board of directors that runs that organization, and there's appointed seats. Every city that has over 100,000 people has an appointed director on the seat. I'm on the board. The county has one. Agriculture has one. The industry has one. So there's set categories. Cities under 100,000 are represented by someone from your group. So that's it. They
Well,
need
it's not a
6.
representative from our group, it's appointed by our group.
Yeah, appointed by your group and represents all cities under 100,000. It's a board that really requires little except to attend 6 board meetings a year and some of the educational forums that are always held in the county to learn about what's happening in our county, in all the cities, with all the purveyors, and hopefully disseminate that information among your peers. That's what it is. So. And I'm here if you have any questions.
Very good.
So I do have something as well. So we have a new council member on Port Hueneme, Jim Hensley, who's here, and he has shown interest in serving in this position, although we didn't receive a formal letter for this group. I received something just like 2 days ago from Jim on that. And I know that there was you had to submit something 14 days in advance. So I just wanted to mention that.
I've talked to Mike Morgan, who's on our city council, and he's been on that group for a few years.
Mike Morgan, yes, he has. He was appointed at your last meeting 2 years ago.
Okay. He's expressed an interest to be reappointed, I thought.
He served 2 years so far, is that correct, Sam?
I understand.
And they are 2-year terms.
I believe you've been generous.
He's been on your other seats as well. We have a water reclamation seat that he has served on. Rosa is serving that right now. He served as alternate on the board as well. So he's been fairly involved in participating in that board for a while.
And I have to say, I didn't talk directly to my Mayor Pro Tem Paul Blatz. I asked staff if it would be appropriate for him to be here since he was on the committee selected as.
Right, he served as alternate. 2 years ago, he was appointed as Mike's alternate.
But I don't know the involvement. When I asked staff, I said to ask him, but I never got a response from him. So I don't know. I don't think there's. Don't know.
It's not an automatic progression in alternate, but it would be. I mean, it's up to you.
And the other thing is, Rick Mills also expressed an interest in this as well from the city.
Are your meetings open?
Yes. Yes, they're open, and actually, all of your cities are members, and we would hope even if you're not appointed, absolutely, please participate. Well, I'm glad that there's so much interest in other.
I wonder why.
Oh,
Arm wrestle.
I personally, if it seems that there's two interested people that want to be part of this board, one being present and one not being present, and
Mr. Morgan as well.
And Mr. Morgan as well, right? So,
And then there's also someone from, two people from Fillmore that are interested as well, right?
one is present. Oh, so you're interested too? Okay, so that was.
And there are 2 seats, and our alternates do, they're active. They participate when needed sometimes, and also just, at their pleasure. So there are 2 seats.
I'll move the representative from Fillmore and from Fort Wayne.
Second.
A motion and a second, any discussion?
I just want to clarify, so one would be a director and one would be alternate director?
Not these two.
They're classified as director and alternate, but they are 2 seats.
Oh, they are 2.
1 vote, but 2 seats.
So we should say which position, I guess, in the motion.
Who's which? Well, we have a mayor and a council member, so let's go with mayor as the alternate, or the director and council member.
And that would be
Your motion?
by name.
Yes.
We should have their names.
Is that Councilmember Hensley as the alternate that you're suggesting?
Yes.
Yes, so the motion by Councilmember Tracy is to appoint City Selection Committee member Tucker as the regular member and Councilmember Hensley as the alternate, correct?
Correct.
And seconded by Munoz-Schnapp?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Keep us apprised.
I'd like to abstain.
Okay. One next. Next is appoint a new city member as director and a new city member as alternate. I see what we did. Moving on. Item 9, appoint a city member as an alternate to the Ventura Local Agency Formation Commission for the remainder of an unexpired 4-year term effective January 1, 2015 through January 1, 2016. We have 2 options. And I noticed that Carmen's very interested in filling that position. I haven't heard of any other interest. Has anyone else?
I would-
I've been reelected.
I would move Carmen Ramirez.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is item 10, review and approve the bylaws for the city selection committee.
So, does everybody have a copy? I have a couple extras, I believe, with me.
I'll take one city printed. I've got it here.
Great. So, I think I'd give out these here. I think I looked into the bylaws themselves for whoever would like a copy of that. If I may, ma'am, at one of our previous meetings, there was some discussion about kind of why we do things and how we do things and the timing of when we do things. So I thought it would be prudent to put together some information regarding the procedures as defined by the statute in the California Government Code, as well as those that are left up to your discretion. Most of the information surrounding the processes and procedures that we have to follow are mandated by the government code, and actually there's very little to your discretion, although certainly the term of office for the chair and vice chair, the time and location of the meetings, the way you want to handle the process for receiving notices of candidacy, and the distribution of the agenda and posting of the materials and that sort of thing. So the formation of the city selection committee itself is mandated by the government code in areas where there are more than one city in the jurisdiction, and then as such, the county clerk of the board becomes your secretary to the committee and responsible for preparing your agendas and all of the materials. Each mayor, by definition, is deemed a member of this. The mayors, in their absence of attendance at any meeting, is free to select any alternate on the council itself. You don't have to predetermine as part of your assignments, as you are a council member, what committees you will be a part of. Literally 24 hours in advance of the meeting, you notify me, I'm not coming, and council member X is, and then you have all the rights and privileges of the council member serving as the mayor. So, and that would be for the term of office while you're mayor. Members on the committee itself serve specifically without any additional compensation for their service on the city selection committee, again as defined by statute. And then we come to your chair and vice chair under Article 3, and that's where I left it blank on this after I had prepared the agenda. Again, I had assumed that all mayors were actually elected for 2-year terms, and it turns out there's a wide variety of how you become a mayor, either elected for a 2-year term. I think on occasion, there's at least one city that potentially has a 4-year term.
No. I just approved too, as I understand it.
Is it
The three of us are all 2 years.
Yeah, they just,
And then
2016.
the remainder of you that are appointed, that appointment schedule also varies. It sometimes is effective in December and sometimes it's effective in January. So the 1-year term, or potentially even a 2-year term of appointment varies as well. So your committee, as a part of approving these bylaws, can set what you want the term of office to be defined as for the chair. So that's one of the first topics for discussion, is to set what the term limit is. Yes.
As I made a comment, there's more 1-year mayor than 2-year mayors in this county.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it should be a 1-year term. I think if the person can always be reappointed. That way the clerk doesn't, it opens the door for everybody, and yet it doesn't, close up the door for a 2-year mayor.
I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
My question is, if by default the mayor is the member anyway, why are we imposing a term?
On the chair.
On the chair, just on the chair.
Chair of the committee,
And the
correct.
chair does not have the, in your previous explanation, does the chair have that replaceability in terms of appointing someone else?
The chair may.
The chair and vice chair, I would think, don't have alternates, right?
No, they have
They do.
alternates in the sense of showing up, but, for instance, Mayor Parvin now is chair of the committee. If she were to designate an alternate to show up in her place, the vice chair of the committee runs the meeting, not her alternate.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. The 1 year makes sense.
Okay.
And again, you have 1 meeting a year.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? The mayor of Oxnard, Tim Flynn, was elected for a 2-year term. Our mayor is elected by the people for 2 years, not appointed or rotated. What other cities have elected?
And Ojai just did.
Ojai now.
And Ojai, and everybody has 2 years.
So, Moore Park is, or,
We're all 2 years.
You're
Okay.
elected by the people.
Yeah.
Is it, are you elected?
and we're going to transition in 2016. Yeah, it's 2 years.
And we're all 2 years.
So it sounds like we have a consensus for 1 year.
Yeah.
Would that be true by all?
Yeah, I think so.
Very good. Goes on to find my duties, and I'll take your minutes for you. The meetings, it does state that you shall specify at least set your regular meeting schedule, which we have, as far as I know, not done. We've called the meeting as needed, and the date and time and the location has been set here at the City of Camarillo on Fridays when they're called at 7:30. That part is also open to your discretion. If this date, time, and location does not work for the committee, we can set a different regular meeting schedule, time, date, location, and it might be prudent to set that regularly scheduled December meeting. A lot of appointments need to take place after the November election, prior to the January term start of those positions, it may be prudent to consider setting on everybody's calendar what that regular meeting looks like and set that in December, and then it's on everybody's calendar. It was very hard to get the consensus in the first place on the meeting for December, and then we got rained out.
Right.
And so if it were a known date now, it potentially could be better attended in the future if that is part of your desire.
Makes sense.
What was the week, was it the first week in December, what routinely, what did you?
I think it should
We have a holiday.
Right,
conference.
so I think either the first or the second week makes sense. Anything later, we're going to run into vacation plans and the like for that. So
For us, I think generally when the election's over and certified, we have our meeting to appoint mayor the second week, the second Tuesday of the month.
And
So
that-
if you do it on the first week,
exactly, that was
Well,
also
let's
part
just
of
do
the
it on the Friday of
consideration.
the second
Second
week, and then you'll be,
So for Port Wayne, it is the third, it's the third week, because it needs to be certified, you know, we need the first and third week. So it gets pushed even
I was in the
further
first
out.
week in January.
But,
Well,
The county could actually expedite it so it happens quicker.
well, Charlie's on my card
That's
there.
true, right?
If the meeting's held on the second Friday in December, you still have a current mayor in position that can attend the committee. It just is not potentially your new elected mayor, correct? But they are in office.
Occurs on the second week, it's going to be Thursday.
Correct. And if Port Hueneme would prefer the third week, I know that's going to run into some timing issues, so.
It's the quorum issue.
Now, are we talking about this particular meeting that
This
we have
exact
now
meeting,
to
yes.
move it forward in December?
This meeting that we're having today in January is a result of a continuation because we had a lack of a quorum to conduct
Because of
the
the
December
flooding.
meeting that we did have scheduled already, correct?
When I served
Yeah,
when I served 4
me too.
years ago, it was a January meeting.
And again, it could be January, but I know that, I think in LAFCO's request, they
Yeah,
wanted it
it's
prior
December.
to January for the
Okay.
purposes of the seat term for that committee.
In December for
Correct.
selection.
May I ask
Yes.
a question, please? And part of your deliberation, coming from an agency that requires appointments, and I've been here for 20-some years with AWA, and this meeting has been held as needed and often, sometimes more than once a year, but our concern is that we want to make sure that the November elections have taken place and that the council, with the new council, is seated before we come with our request, because there may be new council members that are interested, and that you have arranged your committee appointments, because I know each council makes their own committee appointments at some time, and I don't know if that's always December or if sometimes it's in January, I found. So from AWA's perspective, just needing an appointment to a board, we always prefer that you have seated your new council members and appointed your new mayors or elected your new mayors and have gone through your own placement and appointments for committees. So sometimes in December that has not yet taken place. Just a point.
I would suggest unless there's some overriding reason, I'd suggest you set it for January, first, second week of January by that time, the mayors will be, that are appointed are decided, because most of them take place in December. I don't know any that wait till January. Is there, okay.
So,
Has to do with
well, you
certification.
certainly could set your regular meeting in December, and for the entities that do require, such as in the case of AWA, I don't know if we go through the trouble at this point to literally declare your two. Maybe you do set two. There's the second meeting in December, the second week in December, and perhaps the second week of January, or you allow the January meeting to take place as necessary. Part of the problem then is you really are kind of convening this twice, almost back to back.
Right.
And I know that was an issue before as well, that
You don't need-
this is a
you don't need
5-minute
that much
meeting
to have two meetings.
to put
Right.
all of this together, to have all of you in the room for that. It makes sense to potentially do this once,
And
but.
I understand LAFCO's concern, but, realistically, for me anyway, is if you have a contested election, you're not gonna get a lot of that stuff resolved in the beginning of December. And then, like you said, with the holidays in the second half of December, it makes sense to me just to do it the first week in January.
I'd like your opinion on that.
Well, the LAFCO terms do begin January 1st of the year. If it were held the first week of January, that would allow us enough time to bring that new individual up to speed on LAFCO to attend that first meeting, which is held the third week of January. If you wait till the second week of January, you're really pushing, whether that person is going to get up to speed in time to be informed enough at that first meeting in January. So if you don't do December, I recommend the earliest part of January.
Does that work?
January, unless it is January 1st.
That would work. Does that work for most everyone then?
I agree with that.
Okay.
And then the first
Friday in January,
And I was-
unless it's January the
Yeah,
1st.
January 1st could fall on a Friday,
Right.
so.
Yeah, well then that wouldn't work.
Well, you could just say, that other than that, it'll be
Yeah,
held the
then it
second
would be
week.
held the following Friday.
Endless
That's only
holiday.
gonna
Right,
happen-
right.
That's gonna only happen once every 7 years or so.
Yeah.
And again, you did mention Friday. Is Friday an acceptable day of the week to convene this committee?
Sure.
Yeah, it works.
And is 7:30 the right time?
Yeah, traffic wise, it works.
Yeah, it works really
Later-
good traffic
later,
wise.
it's gonna be a problem.
And is Camarillo the right location?
Yeah, it's
Great.
central,
That's
centralized,
We'd
yeah.
love to continue to host this August, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the closest to geographic center we have, I think.
Seems like this is where government center you might need to be, huh? I don't want to start anything. All right.
Too late now.
Yeah.
That changed in 1978.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, on page 4, item D, it talks still more about the meetings themselves. The government code specifies that in convening the meeting at the call of the chair, the secretary shall provide all of you a 10-day notice of the meeting. Your existing bylaws from the 1970s interpret that to mean that in addition to notifying you that there will be a meeting, I am to provide you the agenda, which means I need to know what is on the agenda. The government code just states I need to tell you we're having a meeting, and then I can have all the way up until the 72-hour preceding the meeting date to deliver the agenda. So part of this is to decide when do you want the agenda. You can't have it later than 72 hours preceding the
fine, as
meeting
we all do with our
because
councils.
it's
Right.
Brown Act.
Right.
But like I said, one of the things we were doing before was giving you the agenda in the full 10 days of that meeting date, because that's what your committee in the 70s adopted, and it's never been up for discussion again. So are you comfortable with the notice of 10 days that we will convene a meeting with the agenda and the materials to follow somewhere at least prior to 72 hours? Does your committee wish to specify what that needs to be? I know for our Board of Supervisors, we try to get out our agenda on the Thursday as opposed to Saturday, which would be 72 hours, so that they have it on Thursday. Is there any consensus on your part?
One thing
to-
that I would say is, like, for example, with the city of Ojai, you're not being able to get back or get hold of a council member. You don't know necessarily what appointments are coming up and what council members may be interested in, and to distribute the letters of interest. The more time you have to get that information, it might help us to be able to come to the selection committee more prepared. I agree.
I'm thinking too, if we had that 14 days in advance kind of thing, then the 10 days doesn't hit it, so.
Well, the 10 and 14 are the same, so it's
They
a
are.
14 calendar or 10 working days.
Okay.
And so it's a 2-week period for the notice.
Okay.
And in the existing bylaws, the notice and the agenda and the materials are all in one. And so certainly the entities that require an appointment need to notify the clerk sooner than the 10 days, so that the clerk can prepare the agenda, the materials, get them distributed to meet your defined current 10-day notice for the agenda. Certainly if all they need to do is notify us, and I have somewhere in the back defining, I think we should put some limits on those committees they know what their terms are, they know when the vacancies are occurring, they can provide certainly well in advance of the 10-day notice, unless there is, due to an unscheduled vacancy, at which point they can notify at the point that the unscheduled vacancy occurs. But then you still have whatever buffer you need to circulate the information amongst the various committee council members to solicit any candidacy information, and then have the clerk still have time to distribute that candidacy information out to this committee. So,
So you might have a preference?
Well, I agree that, I mean, the board of supervisor has 5 days, and you're saying, before to pass out the agenda. I mean, I prefer that instead of 72 hour. I think it'd be better for us. I mean, it seems like it's pretty procedure in terms of what's on the agenda, but you never know.
So are you proposing that along with the 10-day notice, you have the agenda 10 days prior to the meeting, or you propose
5 days.
like a 5-day?
5 days at least, I think it would be good.
Yeah,
I personally like
The agenda, but
it.
not the agenda materials, just the agenda.
Well, and that's open for discussion as
Right,
well.
right.
I mean, we can define all of that as well.
So if
in
you have the
terms of your
agenda
pleasure.
to follow up on your comment, then you're gonna know there's openings and positions. You don't necessarily need the backup paperwork for the report, but that gives you a lead time, and you can look into the interested parties.
And in terms of the materials, at the very least, when an entity that requires an appointment, they will have certainly provided me some cover memo and some background on the entity and or the position. And at the point that they've notified me they have a vacancy, this is the term information, this is the current incumbent, or in terms of who was there, what potentially the recommendations are for replacement, either reappoint if this person is still an eligible council member, or appoint someone new. At the very least, I have all of that in terms of materials at the point that I could publish the agenda. What we wouldn't have necessarily would be all of the candidacy information statements, because that might trickle in over the time. And so it would, if I had the agenda, certainly I would publish whatever materials I had at that time.
Sure. Well, I would be okay with the 72 hour, but maybe with the 10-day notice, how about just a sort of a draft agenda, or just a listing of known appointments as a kind of a wake-up call for us.
Yeah.
That I know the way I operate. You know, it's good to have that reminder. That way, you wouldn't have to have the formal agenda prepared 10 days or even 5 days in advance. But at least we already know that there are certain appointments that are going to be up. So.
Potentially. I know one of the issues that we had before in the last meeting, where we literally had 2 back-to-backs, is that if we did follow something what you're saying, in that we provided the 10-day notice without necessarily the agenda, I can add anything now to the agenda prior to 72 hours in advance of the meeting. The way the bylaws are written to date, you needed the 10-day notice even on the agenda, and the materials in the sense of the entity specifying that they have the need. And that forced the secondary meeting, because the materials could not have been distributed within the 10 days of the preceding already scheduled meeting date. I kind of like the 10-day notice, and I certainly can adhere to a 5-day. I should have, within 5 days preceding the meeting, a finalized agenda. I think it would be unlikely that someone in 5 days of that scheduled meeting, all of a sudden discovering they have a need and needing to be crammed onto that agenda. But we can also state it in such a way that your preference is the 5-day, certainly a 10-day notice. Hey, we are having a meeting. You don't need to know the meat. You don't need to know why. We're just having a meeting. And at the 5-day interval, publish the agenda, much like what we do for the Board of Supervisors. But like the Board of Supervisors, if someone invents a new item that they didn't know about when I publish the agenda 5 days in advance, if they at least invent that item within the 72 hours, I can't amend the agenda without having to call a whole nother meeting for that term or that appointment. So if that's your pleasure, that can be written in, that your preference is, and the goal would be.
We're getting a lot of nods here. I think we
Yeah,
have
let's
consensus.
just put it that way. I think
Okay.
everybody's
So
fine.
I can just- everybody's shaking their head, yes.
You have a comfort level with it too.
Mr.
That's important.
Tucker?
The only comment that I make is, I am fine with the materials 72 hours in advance, because then that gives you some flexibility, but maybe on just the 10-day notice, because the appointments are gonna come up on a routine basis, maybe just throw out when you do the notice of a meeting, what potential appointments are coming up, so that way we can ask our council.
Call it a draft.
Absolutely.
That was exactly what I was
Yeah.
suggesting.
I'm with you, John.
Okay.
All right.
Santa Clara Valley.
That 10-day
Yeah.
notice, in that 10-day notice, you can call for any other items that are not on the
Exactly.
proposed.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That-
Yeah, I don't-
Great minds
Scary.
And obviously, we need a quorum.
Say agriculture.
Obviously, we need a quorum. It takes a majority of the voting members to pass something. These meetings are Brown Act meetings, and they are, of course, open to the public. And we post signs. This facility is not open to the public at 7:30 in the morning, but my council has advised that at least if we post signs and make it available where if the public knocked or made some sort of gesture that they needed in, that of course we would welcome them. Your discussions as you deliberate matters are again open and available for both the candidates that are participating as well as any of the representatives from the entities themselves. The whole meeting is open. There's nothing defined as a closed session item for your committee, so like I said, it is completely open. And most of you, I think, are familiar with Robert's Rules of Order for parliamentary procedure. I don't know if you're familiar with Rosenberg's Rules of Order.
How different, I mean, what's the difference?
Rosenberg is a judge that condensed Roberts and Rules of Order into a pamphlet, and it is essentially the same thing, but simple. And
We
so-
use it, Camry.
There you go.
Huh.
So again,
It
that's,
simplifies so much.
it simplifies a lot. It's no real different than
It's not-
Robert's Rules of
it's nothing
Order,
new or
except
different, it's just,
it takes out the stuff that's not necessary.
exactly. It's kind of
Will you send us
modernized.
a copy of it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd
We'll
be
get
great.
everybody
I never
copies.
heard of it, actually. I thought it was humorous. I wasn't sure it was serious.
You guys use it too? Or tell you use it?
No, we looked at it because we do have time for
I think you would agree for the purposes of this committee, it would be sufficient if you're familiar with it. It would be acceptable, and then so as well.
We'll get up to speed.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the agenda. Your current bylaws state that you are to receive a copy of the agenda and the materials via email and via mail. Are you comfortable with losing the hard copy in the mail, or would you like me to still submit the hard copy in the mail as well as the email?
I think emails.
Personally, leaning towards email.
Fine.
I'm old fashioned.
I like it. It's not that large of a mission.
Excellent.
Does not overlap.
And then does your committee have a preference in terms of the candidacy statements? Again, the old bylaws stated that the candidacy statements needed to be submitted to the clerk, or if they were in fact submitted to any of the committee members, then the committee member would submit it to the clerk, and the clerk then would distribute it to the committee. And that specified that that should happen not less than the 14 days prior to the meeting, which goes back to that whole 10-day, 2-week notice. Do you want to exclude anybody that didn't submit it within that timely period? Do you
We
even
haven't
want to?
done that, I mean, today we.
No, today, yeah.
On the spot.
On the
You
spot.
could not specify this at all, in the sense that, in imposing a timeline. The government code specifies that you shall adopt procedures for nominating and selecting city representatives for this. It could be as simple as any known candidacy statements that are either submitted to you as the members or me as the clerk shall then be redistributed out to all of the members, and potentially it does not preclude anybody from literally showing up today and announcing their candidacy, if that's your preference. If you're not interested in necessarily excluding any candidacy based on any deadlines imposed, the deadlines can be taken out, and we can simply process those candidacy statements as they come in, so that everybody is aware that there is in fact a candidate in mind. Perhaps you want to encourage the sharing of the candidacy information as opposed to screening 3 nominees at the committee member, if it can be known prior to coming to today.
I think in the past, and I haven't been there that long, but in the past, there used to be a number of candidates that would apply for different positions. There were so many that it was nice to see the information of knowing who was most interested. Just like I appreciated Carmen's request. Personally, I like knowing it ahead of time. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but maybe we could encourage that our preference would be to receive information on interested candidates, but not limited to that. And we would encourage their participation at these meetings too.
I would suggest in the Brown Act is also that the emails for the candidacy statement should go through the county clerk.
Absolutely.
Right,
Not
that's-
direct emails.
Right. So my thought is that certainly if the candidates are in fact contacting you as the mayors that, hey, I'm interested, your job then would be to forward that information to me, and I would distribute it out to the committee itself so that you all are not in communication with each other in violation of the Brown Act.
Chair, I agree with you. I know we don't want to potentially exclude anybody from not nominating themselves,
Right.
but I would feel not comfortable reading it today and then deliberating a nomination because I read it today and exclude the people that actually submitted before. I kind of like the 14. If we want to kind of reduce it, I just don't. I really feel uncomfortable receiving nominations a day or two before the meeting.
I just remember there was a particular person that a few years ago that applied for LAFCO as an alternate member, and I don't think they had any idea what LAFCO was really all about, but nobody else showed interest, and there was no letters, and that was and we had to decide that day, and that doesn't work very well. So I think we should try to encourage people to communicate with you and submit their interest to you. And I think we should use that language somehow in here so that they'll think, well, I should submit something instead of just show up.
But what procedurally, this is my 4th year coming to this, and we've always kind of done it like we did today. We've done it the last 4 years,
Yeah.
just for me. But why couldn't we have a deadline, a procedural deadline, where our clerk sends letters to all the mayors and asks them to distribute to their council members at X time, ahead of time, if you're interested. And we don't do that, okay? At least I haven't seen it. And then we would be put on notice, as whoever's the letter goes to have our city manager put it out from the city manager at that point, not from us. Because if you're interested, we're going to have a meeting, and you're going to let us know by X date if you're interested. Because we have, at least I haven't seen that. And that might make it a little easier in terms of what you're suggesting. Okay, at least we get the word out.
But we do get the word.
Yeah.
And that was the purpose of constructing the agendas in such a way that they had all the information with the hope. You're right, the words weren't there to say, please do this.
What I'm
Yeah.
suggesting,
Do it.
what I'm
Right.
suggesting is, I mean, we're all busy, okay? That a letter comes to whoever the person is, and in our case it would be the mayor, okay, by everybody's case, I guess.
Right.
Would you please see that through your city manager, see that this distributes to your council, your council's interested in this specific position, and we need to know by X date. I just think it would be a layer that would at least hit me, that I would immediately send to the city manager, we go out, we respond, if they don't respond.
Aren't you also dealing with the city clerks of each city?
The city clerk gets a copy of the
But
agenda and
here's the point.
materials, but
Right.
there's no real communication in terms of what to do
So
with it.
we go through, the way I work, okay, because we just have so many mayors, have so many meetings, I don't look at this until right ahead of time.
okay, I just don't. So you say, well, so I'm supposed to figure that out.
Right,
If
right.
you sent me a letter and said, here's what the deal is, I'll do it.
I think that's a very good suggestion. I agree. See, if we could just get some time to have the new election, maybe before the mayor's going to be appointed or whatever. That we send out a notice saying, that coming Blacko, or coming year, Blacko, this needs to be appointed and reappointed. And please allow the council to.
Maybe you just go to, it doesn't have to go to, maybe you just go to the city manager.
City manager.
Yeah, and you have to go, bypass us. We don't have to worry about it, just send it to the city managers. They'll send it out to those, to colleagues.
Yeah, in some cases, maybe your city manager's busy too. And it doesn't seem like a huge priority to them, possibly. I mean, there's a lot going on for them too, so maybe we should be copied on the one
That's
that
fine.
goes for our city
That's fine.
manager.
Well,
It's kind of a shared responsibility.
That's right, I
Yeah.
think that would be better.
Okay.
Well, I would
It's-
say
there's-
members, city manager and city clerk, the city
Yeah.
clerks are, I think are more, for
Oh,
sure.
yeah, they're all over it, yeah, I agree.
I personally like the way that it was done. I thought it was done pretty efficient by the city clerk and CC, and the city clerk just CC the mayor and the city manager, and it was done. It was a clear process to me, but just adding the deadline language makes sense to me. Because it gave me, it's like, if you want to nominate yourself 14 days, it was clear to me. I was like, I thought Carmen did an excellent job submitting her being right on time.
She did it right.
And I thought
good.
that was great.
Oh, I didn't do it. Hey.
And I don't want to preclude the last minute necessarily because of the nature of the beast that you described, but I think all of us would take that into consideration. We may favor someone who did it ahead of time. I mean, but that's up
Right, I
to, that's
agree.
up to individual people.
I agree with that too.
So,
So
I mean, in the
more
case,
flexibility there.
of Doug presenting himself here, I mean, that's great. So
Yeah,
we
I
can make that
didn't know he was
determination,
interested.
so. Anyway.
Can I weigh in just a second? I didn't get the notice because Cheryl got it, but I'm just looking at this email. It was sent on January 7th. It says there's going to be a meeting on January 30th, and that we're going to be looking at appointments for Association of Water Agencies, Board of Directors of local agencies, and LAFCO. So that's like, what, 3 weeks?
In this case, you had the 3 weeks because we knew it was a continuation of the meeting that was postponed, break out. I think we probably only had a 10-day notice in preparing for the December meeting for this exact agenda. And so this one, you had a little bit of luxury of time because we knew it in mid-December, frankly, to get this going.
So just for clarification, but we're not saying, oh, I'm sorry.
We're talking about having the meeting in January, right?
Correct.
So in December, you're going to know
I will know
coming
when
up.
terms are coming up.
Each mayor gets this notice. I don't
Correct.
see anything all that complicated about this. I mean, I get the notice, it's emailed, there's no middleman here. You know, as the mayor, I'm going to be basically making the appointments anyway. So what's to prevent me from just reaching out to my colleagues and saying, okay, it doesn't seem that complicated.
That's fine. Like I said, I
Yeah,
have
that's
no
fine.
problem at
That's what I
we
do
will
too.
know the upcoming expiration terms based on the election cycles and the other way the terms work. They're not always tied to elections. Certainly, as those terms are coming up, I can notify the mayors, the city managers, and the city clerks all in one fell swoop and say, here you go, here's the information, and start thinking about the potential appointments, because soon there will be a meeting.
Yeah, that's great.
That's it.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
And then just for clarification, the letters of intent should be within before the 72 hours, preferably, because we've been saying 10 days, but if we're only giving the notice 10 days ahead of time, then you get the notice, and that day you're supposed to turn in the letter of intent. So just for clarification, are we saying 72 hours, they should be turned in 2 hours, so it goes with the agenda? So you get 7 days. You know,
I mean, if I got something yesterday, I could have sent it out. I don't
To
know
all
how
of us.
frequently you all are in the office and checking and doing all of that, but literally, if I did receive something yesterday, I would have sent it out yesterday, which would have been after the 72 hours. The candidacy statement in terms of the Brown Act is not a requirement that I had at 72 hours. The agenda is what's critical.
I think it's important that everything gets submitted at a certain time and place, so that we have a full understanding of the list of candidates, and not have one dropped on us at the meeting or 72 hours before the meeting. We're gonna have it 10 days before, that all the candidates should be there 10 days before, not straggling after that. That's my view.
And the thing is, if you're getting the notice of the opening 10 days before, how are you gonna get the notice of intent 10 days before?
I thought we were talking about a longer notice period.
Well, you'll certainly have the notice part in the sense that a vacancy is about to occur.
That's right.
And you'll have that well in advance, certainly of the 10 days, and we can do that
That's all you
in
need to start it,
November,
but
December.
there ought to be a time when this committee gets everyone who's interested, gets their resumes or whatever it is that they submit. I don't
And
know
we
whether
can
that's
draft it in
72
such a way
hours.
that you're specifying that the preference is, I think I'm hearing though that you're not imposing to the extent that you would exclude any applications that came in after this deadline of 72 hours or whatever it is. You would reject a notice that potentially came in yesterday if you did have your preference of 72 hours, correct?
Well, my feeling is if we have a time that, it seems to me that this committee should have all the candidates listed for whatever position they're looking for. And then, not have one dropped on you, and then, the day before or that day.
Thank you so much, Jim Hensley, alternate, hopefully. This advance notice is cool, if you get it. Now, my notice was from AWA on January the 28th. And I was trying to go through the rigmarole to find out, and I never got anything cohesive, except finally, Jim, you should get your panty down there tomorrow morning. So here I am. So it's great to have the 14-day notice if everybody gets it. So
Well, when possible. I mean, I think we should write it in a way that has a lot of flexibility. Because again, there may not be an applicant for a particular position, and we may have to
Right.
appoint someone. One of us might have to volunteer for it.
whoever doesn't attend the meeting gets it.
That's right.
And would you also like to specify that, again, encourage when possible that in fact even the candidates themselves show up to the meeting?
I think we should encourage that because we have questions, especially if we have a number of people applying.
Makes sense.
Has that happened in the past, years ago when I applied for?
Excellent. Any other topics on that? Okay. And so this then, Article 8, the request for meeting, this kind of puts some requirements on those entities that do require your services for appointment. And so what I initially put out there was that the entities would provide 45 days notice to the clerk that such a vacancy would be occurring. I drew that 45 days from the Postal Commission. The governor has to, when he provides his notice that he needs you to convene, he gives you 45 days to convene. And so I thought, well, if it was good enough for the governor, why wouldn't it be good enough for any of the other entities that are out there that in fact within 45 days they are having an upcoming vacancy? That certainly would then provide the catalyst to provide you that notice that you're seeking well in advance of those potential expiration dates, and that the entity need to provide certain information such as the person currently holding the position, why is it being vacated, did they unexpectedly resign, did their term end, did their council seat end, did the term on the committee end, did they not seek reelected, did they not get reelected, certainly specifying the beginning and end dates of the term so you know what they're being appointed to into that position, and include information about whether or not, especially if they're filling an unexpired term, to specify that they are fulfilling the remainder days, weeks, months, years of the existing term. And also whether or not an alternate is also needed to be appointed at the same time. and then provide some contact information from that specific agency so I know who to yell at for to request further information. Is that reasonable? Can the, especially to the entities that are here, is 45 days a reasonable? And maybe it needs to be worded where it's not a absolute as well. If there's some flexibility, especially in the sense that you have somebody resigning, they're not certainly giving you 45 days that they have left their seat. And so 45 days, or potentially as soon as possible, in the event of an unscheduled vacancy.
Because we have vacancy elections.
Right.
The person's not re-elected.
Right.
45 days may not get it.
Okay.
I just had that where you know we covered it.
Okay.
Comfortable?
Yes.
Okay. And then in Article 9, I detailed for you the specific entities by which you are mandated to make these appointments and what the government code is that specifies it, what their terms shall be, and open for debate as well is the Association of Water Agencies. There is no statute that requires your committee to make these appointments. By statute, all of the other appointments that you make, such as to Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency Board of Directors, LAPCO, BCTC, the Air Pollution Control Board, Cal State University Channel Islands Site Authority, and the California Coastal Commission. Those are all mandated by various government codes that force you to make those appointments. The Association of Water Agencies, I believe there is an agreement that must date back years, for which I don't have, where this committee and AWA must have come to some sort of agreement to ask the committee to make an appointment. The committee must have agreed, and therefore the committee makes the appointments. That agreement, again, is up to your discretion. I wouldn't propose today that that is something that you want to immediately remove. That's just something for you to be aware of, that there's no statute requirement surrounding that entity. Given that it is a representative of the city and the alternate that goes along with it, it may be prudent that this is the right venue for that transaction to occur. And while you don't appoint necessarily to the California Coastal Commission, as you've seen in the past, we do make nominations when called upon by the governor to do that. So again, I throw all of that out there for your information so that you have all of that. And I'd be happy to entertain any other thoughts or information that you would like to put in it, or if you have other questions procedurally about how we kind of need to conduct business.
So on the AWA, would it then be suggested that there would be a formality involved that you need? I mean, you don't have one to date, and
if you're adopting the bylaws, it will now become part of the bylaws, and that itself will be the documentation that we need. If your thought process is at some point that you want to remove it, it can be agendized, and we can consider again topic for discussion to remove it. Once it's in here, I don't need it. This itself can serve as the agreement. And in essence, what I'm imagining is that technically either party can withdraw from this. The AWA can't force you to make the appointment, and you can't force AWA to say we are the body that makes this appointment. There's no statutory requirement on either party.
However, this has been going on for some time.
Absolutely, yes.
It seems to me that it works.
Yes.
And I can see the time down the road where perhaps there's another organization that is there that somebody has to make an appointment representing the cities.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the place to do it. So create it this way, keep it this way. You always have the opportunity to expand it if you wanted to.
I would move approval of the bylaws as we recommended as we went through the process.
Motion and second discussion.
Before we take a vote on that, I just want to also ask, in the sense that we've declared that it is Fridays at this date, time, and location, there isn't another meeting that we can tag this onto that the mayors are all present at, that we don't have to convene this special? I forgot to ask that earlier.
No, we're only doing.
There's no such thing anymore. Okay. No. Trade and call
But
for the
nice
vote.
try.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Call for the vote.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion
Thank you
carries.
very much. Adjourn the meeting then.
We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Longest meeting I've ever had.
Respective cities.
That's the long day.
Good job, Dan.
Yeah, that's what I was telling people, I'll be back in St. Paul.
That's funny. And that's what you have to unplug everything. All right. Give your wife a hug for me.
See you guys.
Very organized meeting.
Good, I'm glad that,
Cities of population, it's just the way it is, so the board wouldn't be 50 members. If you're a city over 100,000, they all have, every term, they appoint directly from their councils. But, you know, then we'd have to add probably 5 more seats for the cities under, and if the board would, I don't know. That's
It
the way
would
it's
be a
set up.
lot, yeah, but it would be good.
Good job, Brian. You got everything you need.
It's like critical right now. I'm telling you.
Mayor Prosper, we're gonna have to get together for that coffee. He was mayor.
See you, Mike.
that was obviously Mayor Valserco. It was the council meeting. Yes. Where we did everything wrong. Yes,
I'll find you.
Nice.
I'm gonna make sure.
We stepped up. Ventura County.